Growing up in a working-class family, Frank spent summers learning the value of hard work on construction sites alongside his father, a dedicated contractor. Though the physical labor honed his discipline, Frank envisioned a different path, one that led to innovation and engineering excellence. He pursued his dreams through rigorous academic effort, earning a degree in mechanical engineering and landing a position that marked the beginning of a lifelong commitment to the field. Years later, a chance meeting with Jack Park, a fellow engineer disillusioned by corporate rigidity, altered the course of Frank's career. Jack's ambition to revolutionize the industrial machinery sector resonated with Frank's own aspirations. Together, they established Park Machinery, overcoming initial financial hurdles to build a company known for its ingenuity and client-focused solutions. Their partnership thrived, with Frank excelling as the head of design and Jack steering the business toward consistent growth. Frank Alton parked his truck near the entrance of Walgreens, surprised by the bustling parking lot on Labor Day weekend. He planned to quickly grab a few toiletries before heading to a motel. Light traffic on the interstate had allowed him to arrive ahead of schedule, giving him extra time to apartment hunt before beginning a new 2-year project. Frank disliked motel living, but his job as an engineer for Park Machinery Company often required it. Park Machinery specialized in creating customized manufacturing facilities, from designing production lines to installing robotic equipment. The company catered to smaller manufacturers without in-house engineering teams, offering solutions tailored to client needs and industry demands. This adaptability was vital in fast-evolving sectors like chip production, where facilities often required frequent upgrades. Frank, who had been with the company since college, excelled at translating client ideas into practical, cost-effective designs. He stayed current with the latest technologies, particularly robotics, through courses and meticulous research. Over the years, Frank received numerous job offers, but turned them down to stay close to his family and maintain a stable home life. 3 years earlier, his boss and neighbor, Jack Park, invited him to lunch. Their conversation meandered from business to personal topics before Jack addressed the real issue, the company's growth and Frank's changing role. Frank and Jack had a long history. Both engineers, they had left unsatisfactory first jobs to pursue better opportunities. Jack, after a fallout with his employer, started Park Machinery with loans and grit, later persuading Frank to join as head of design. Despite the risks, Frank and his wife agreed it was worth it, and the decision paid off. The company expanded rapidly, thanks in part to Frank's dedication. Over the years, they opened offices across the US and Europe, becoming a leader in industrial machinery. Frank's hard work earned him financial security and recognition within the company. Recently, however, Jack noticed changes in Frank. At lunch, Jack addressed Frank's declining morale and its impact on the team. While Jack wasn't asking for his resignation, he urged Frank to refocus and regain his footing. Frank, aware of his recent irritability and its effect on colleagues, acknowledged the need to reset. He knew that without an attitude adjustment, both his performance and the company could suffer. Frank leaned back in his chair and nodded. "You're right, Jack. I've been letting personal issues bleed into work. I'll make an effort to turn that around." Jack gave him a serious look. "I actually brought you here to discuss something bigger. This new project is our first full turnkey operation, and it's critical. We've considered letting Roger Bass take the lead. But he lacks construction experience, and if the building falls behind, the entire project will fail." "Are you saying we need to hire someone?" Frank asked. "No, not at all," Jack replied. "I want you to take charge of the project. This will give you a fresh start and keep you busy enough to clear your head. You'd still oversee the design department, but I'll step in more, and we'll make it work. I'll cover your travel expenses, pay for your lodging, and even throw in a daily food stipend. Plus, if you finish ahead of schedule, the contract includes a bonus, which I'll split with you." Frank raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" Jack grinned. "Completely. It's a great opportunity for both of us." As they ate, they dissected the project in detail, identifying potential challenges. Frank had a solid foundation in construction, having worked summers with his father, a contractor, until he graduated college. Though his father hoped he'd join the family business, Frank chose engineering, knowing his brother would eventually take over. Back at the office, Frank told Jack he'd decide by the end of the day. He shut his office door to think. With his son married and living at home temporarily, taking on the project out of state wouldn't disrupt his personal life. The design team was competent, and remote management seemed feasible with modern technology. By late afternoon, Frank informed Jack he'd take the job. Upon arriving at the site, Frank quickly met with the client and contractor to streamline plans and address any concerns. He negotiated to cover potential cost overruns to keep the project on track. Setting up a construction trailer and office, he leased a truck for mobility. Frank pushed the team to work 7 days a week, prioritizing key tasks like clearing the site, installing infrastructure, and laying the factory's concrete slab. As the building went up, he expedited machinery delivery and setup, coordinating everything to minimize downtime. By the time the factory was ready, most of the equipment was already installed. The project was delivered to the client 4 months ahead of schedule. Back at Park Machinery, Frank resumed leading the design department with minimal disruptions during his absence. The time away and the project's complexity had helped him regain his focus. A month later, Jack walked into his office and handed him a check for $112,000, a share of the bonus and recognition for the company's strengthened relationship with the client. They had been invited to bid on global projects, thanks to Frank's success. After his divorce, Frank became the go-to manager for Park Machinery's biggest projects, spending nearly half his time on the road. While he didn't enjoy the constant travel, it gave him a much-needed distraction from his personal troubles. The divorce had left him bitter, but staying busy helped him avoid dwelling on his pain. Frank had met Claudia in college, where their relationship began quickly. He was a senior and she was a freshman. Soon after his graduation and landing a job, they married despite his suggestion to wait until she finished school. Claudia had only attended college to appease her parents and left after their wedding, taking a job as a bank teller. She later returned to the bank after their son was born and steadily rose to branch manager. Despite their financial success, cracks began to appear in their marriage. Arguments became frequent, intimacy faded, and their son moved out after high school. Frank suspected to escape the constant tension at home. One morning, Frank found a letter and divorce papers waiting for him. Claudia revealed she'd met someone else, emptied half their savings, and moved in with a younger coworker. The relationship didn't last long, nor did her subsequent ones. Frank, determined to give her a clean slate, signed over their rental properties, stocks, and other assets, keeping only his home. After finalizing the divorce, he took a week off to grieve alone, renting a beach house where he drowned his sorrows in alcohol. Upon returning, he learned Claudia had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. This betrayal deepened his bitterness and left him unable to pursue another relationship. The next project Frank managed was complex, involving a phased overhaul of a manufacturing plant for Carlson Fabrication. The job required building a new addition, installing machinery, transferring operations from the old section, replacing outdated equipment, and constructing a second addition. When completed, the facility would become one of the most advanced of its kind in the country. After purchasing supplies, Frank headed to his rental car in the Walgreens parking lot, only to find a woman waiting behind it. Ellen Harper, around his age and casually dressed, admitted she had accidentally bumped his car while parking. Though the damage was minor, she insisted on providing her insurance information. Ellen, too, had been preoccupied, thinking about changes at work as she rushed to grab a few items. Since her daughter Vanessa's wedding, Ellen had lived alone. Vanessa had moved to California with her new husband, a computer science graduate. They seemed happy, with Vanessa enjoying her work as a teacher. "I love working with kids," she'd told her mother, "as long as there's someone else's." Vanessa and Ellen's relationship had been tense since Ellen's divorce. While Vanessa knew her father was at fault, she felt Ellen bore some responsibility too. Ellen avoided discussing the reasons for the breakup, but Vanessa's father had simply said he and Ellen had grown apart. This led to frequent arguments, and just before Vanessa left for California, she lashed out, accusing her mother of becoming bitter and cold. The words stung, but Ellen couldn't deny there was some truth to them. Ellen had met Dean in college, where they were both engineering majors. His charisma and spontaneity drew her in, and they quickly became a couple. By their senior year, they were living together, and Dean proposed at graduation. They married a few months later, settled into jobs in their hometown, and seemed to have an ideal life. Ellen stayed home to raise their daughter Vanessa after 2 years of working. Frugal and resourceful, she managed their household well, believing their life together was happy and fulfilling. That belief shattered one night when Dean announced he wanted a divorce, claiming he'd been unhappy for years. Ellen later discovered he'd been having an affair with a younger coworker for over a year. Looking back, she recognized the signs she'd ignored: frequent business trips, late-night meetings, diminished bonuses, and constant arguments. The divorce proceedings were contentious, but Ellen fought for their home, child support, and Vanessa's college tuition. The judge granted her requests and ordered Dean to replace the money he'd drained from their accounts. After the divorce, Ellen faced the daunting task of re-entering the workforce after 20 years. Job offers were scarce, and even interviews were rare. A headhunter told her she was essentially unemployable due to her lengthy absence from the job market. That changed when her uncle, Grant Carlson, offered her a position at his fabrication plant. Though she started as an engineering assistant, Ellen quickly demonstrated her capabilities and earned promotions, eventually becoming the production manager. The company faced a major setback when they lost a significant client to a Chinese competitor. Ellen feared for her job, but came up with a plan to diversify their customer base. She pitched the idea to her uncle, who gave her full support, and reassigned her duties to let her focus on finding new business. Within months, Ellen had secured contracts with the defense and automotive industries, revitalizing the company and filling their production lines. They soon operated at full capacity, with plans to add a third shift after installing new machinery. Ellen's efforts didn't go unnoticed. She became well respected in the industry, and headhunters regularly approached her with offers, but she remained loyal to her uncle and the company. Her salary reflected her value, and she'd become her uncle's trusted confidant. At 70, Grant Carlson still actively managed the business, often relying on Ellen to help set goals and navigate challenges. Ellen was known for her fairness and dedication, earning the respect of her employees. She handled union negotiations smoothly and rarely encountered disputes. Yet despite her professional success, Ellen poured herself into work partly to avoid the loneliness of her empty home. Though she had built a thriving career, she couldn't escape the longing for the life she once imagined for herself. Ellen Harper had taken on a pivotal role at Carlson Fabrication, often chairing board meetings on behalf of her uncle, Grant Carlson. Her authority and decision-making earned her the respect of the board, who trusted that Grant backed her every move. Despite her professional success, Ellen couldn't help but reflect on her personal life, haunted by the belief that she bore some blame for her failed marriage. She often wondered if she could have done more to keep Dean from straying, though the pain and guilt lingered. As she waited by a pickup truck in the Walgreens parking lot, a man approached. She smiled and spoke up. "Is this your truck? I'm afraid I bumped it." He examined the scuff on the door and shrugged. "It's just a mark. A little rubbing compound will take care of it. It's a rental. They probably won't even notice." Ellen reached for her wallet. "I'd feel better giving you my insurance information." He waved her off. "No need. Most people wouldn't have waited around for something this small. You're one of the good ones." "Well," she replied, "I'd hope others would do the same for me." As he turned to leave, she handed him her business card. "Just in case. If the rental company has any issues, tell them to contact me." He glanced at the card, then back at her. "Mrs. Harper, don't you recognize my voice?" She paused, his voice striking a familiar chord. "I'm sorry, should I?" He handed her his own card. Recognition dawned, and she laughed, shaking her head. "Of all the cars to hit, it had to be yours." They chatted briefly, laughing about the coincidence. Before parting, Ellen gave him directions to his motel and sketched a quick map to the factory. Frank Alton, the man she had unintentionally bumped into, drove off with a lighthearted smile. Frank checked into his motel, pleased with the quiet room facing a wooded stream. After unpacking, he lay on the bed to recover from his flight and soon fell asleep to the soothing sound of running water. When he woke hours later, he reviewed the project specifications but dozed off again mid-read. Morning came quickly, and Frank started his day with coffee brewed from his trusty travel-size machine. After a refreshing shower, Frank dressed in a casual yet practical outfit and prepared to visit the job site. This project included a unique feature, a secure addition to the existing facility, designed to function independently. With his survey tools ready, he planned to stake elevations for the site contractor. Frank hoped Carlson Fabrication would provide him temporary workspace until his office trailer was operational. As he drove to the site, he felt the familiar mix of challenge and anticipation that came with managing a complex project. Frank easily located Carlson Fabrication and decided to introduce himself, ensuring his plans for site work and office trailer placement wouldn't disrupt operations. Stepping into the lobby, he was impressed. The space was clean, modern, and inviting, making an excellent first impression. The receptionist, dressed in a sharp business suit, greeted him warmly and professionally before announcing his arrival to Grant Carlson. After a brief wait, Grant entered, shook Frank's hand, and asked about his trip. As they walked to his office, Frank stopped to comment, "Mr. Carlson, I have to say, this is one of the best first impressions I've had. Your lobby is immaculate and your receptionist is outstanding, pleasant, professional, and a real asset to your company. If this is how your business operates, I'm looking forward to working with you." Grant chuckled as they entered his office. "Careful with the compliments or she'll take over my job," he joked. Frank laughed and shared a contrasting story about a previous client whose unkempt lobby and indifferent receptionist had made a terrible impression. "First impressions matter, and your company clearly understands that," Frank concluded. Grant shook his head. "Some companies never realize why they fail." The phone rang, and Grant excused himself to take the call. Frank observed him during the conversation. His youthful demeanor, confident posture, and polished office reflected a man who knew how to run a successful business. Frank also recalled what he'd learned about Grant. He had started his business in a two-car garage, building a reputation for quality and reliability. As demand grew, he left his day job and expanded his operation. Now, Grant owned nearly all the company's stock, with a small portion held by board members. Grant's personal life seemed equally steady. Married to his childhood sweetheart, the couple's enduring love was evident. They had 2 children, Sarah, who tragically passed away from a pills overdose during her first year of college, and Grant Jr., who pursued a career in diplomacy. Grant Jr. had worked for the State Department for years, with recent rumors suggesting he might become the next NATO ambassador. When Grant finished his call, he apologized for the delay, and they dove into discussing Frank's construction schedule. Grant reviewed the plans and agreed they could manage the work without disrupting operations. He made 2 requests. Construction workers should stay off the production floor unless necessary, and vending machines should be placed in a separate trailer to prevent mobile canteens from crowding the property. "I'm concerned about extra traffic interfering with our trucks," he explained. Frank outlined his strategy to complete the site work first, including roads, curbs, and parking lots. This would give construction crews dedicated parking and reduce traffic on existing areas. Satisfied with the discussion, Frank packed his briefcase. "Mr. Carlson," Frank said, "if I can finish this project ahead of schedule, how would that impact your operations?" "I aim to complete work as efficiently as possible." Grant smiled, clearly appreciating Frank's approach. "Early completion would be a game changer. Let's make it happen." As they discussed the construction timeline, a noise behind Frank caught his attention. Grant introduced Ellen Harper, the production manager, noting she would be Frank's main point of contact. Frank turned and smiled. It was the same woman from the Walgreens parking lot. Now in a business suit and shop coat, she looked sharp and professional. "We've met," Frank said with a grin. "More like I hit his truck," Ellen admitted, laughing. "It was just a scuff," Frank reassured her. "Hardly worth mentioning." Ellen joined the meeting, offering valuable input on the plans. She suggested building a temporary road for construction vehicles to minimize disruptions, an idea Frank readily agreed to. Grant approved the expense, emphasizing the importance of efficiency. Grant then suggested Ellen give Frank a tour of the facility to familiarize him with their operations. Ellen explained each process in detail, pausing occasionally to address worker concerns or sign quality control forms. "You've got more quality control staff than most companies I've worked with," Frank noted. "We don't cut corners on quality," Ellen replied firmly. "Our reputation depends on delivering flawless parts. With the new machinery you're installing, we hope to streamline the process, not to save money, but to improve precision." After the 2-hour tour, they returned to Grant's office. Though invited to lunch, Frank declined, citing preparations for construction. Ellen showed him to an unused office he could use until his trailer arrived. Frank immediately got to work, using a phone book to make arrangements. Within 5 days, his trailer was operational with phones and other essentials in place. Park Machinery had already contracted the necessary teams, so Frank meticulously reviewed the schedule before organizing a meeting with all contractors and union representatives. He secured a private room at a local restaurant and invited 2 decision-makers from each union, along with the contractors. Grant had prior commitments, but Ellen agreed to attend in his stead. Only the 3 of them knew the meeting's purpose. On the night of the event, Frank arrived early to oversee preparations. He arranged for an open bar before and after dinner, creating a relaxed atmosphere. As attendees arrived, they enjoyed drinks and studied the project blueprints Frank had laid out. Dinner was served promptly at 7 o'clock, and the gathering felt more like a friendly dinner party than a business meeting. After the meal, Frank stood to address the group. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ellen Harper from Carlson Fabrication. Carlson has entrusted Park Machinery with building 2 major facility additions and installing cutting-edge equipment. This expansion will quadruple their production capacity and create significant employment opportunities in the area. Frank's introduction set the stage for a collaborative discussion, ensuring everyone left the meeting aligned and motivated to achieve the ambitious project goals. Frank began the meeting with a clear proposal. Here's the plan. I want 3 shifts working 5 days a week. Each foreman will be paid an hour of daily overtime for coordinating with the next shift. Park machinery will cover the cost. I also want a guarantee: no slowdowns, no work stoppages. We'll pay shift differentials, but on one condition. Every worker must agree this will be their only job. I can't have anyone coming in exhausted from another gig. Murmurs spread through the room, but Frank raised his hand for silence. Listen, this isn't about making your lives harder. It's about working smarter. Contractors, I understand you might think this eats into your profit margins, but prove any cost overruns to me and I'll make it right. Park Machinery has resources on standby to expedite materials or equipment. He turned to the union reps. This benefits everyone. Carlson has contracts ready to go once the machinery is running. Contractors finish faster, earn more, and move to the next job. Park Machinery profits. The community gets well-paying jobs, and unions send a powerful message. If you want quality work done fast, you hire union labor. To highlight this, I'll bring in a PR team and photographer to showcase your work. The publicity alone will mean more opportunities for your members. Frank opened the floor for discussion, keeping the debate to an hour. This doesn't need to be settled tonight, he said, ending the session with a smile. We've all had a drink or two, and I don't want anyone blaming the bourbon tomorrow. Let's reconvene in a day or two with your feedback. As attendees filtered out, Frank and Ellen stayed to answer questions. By 10:30, the room was empty, and Frank turned to Ellen. Care to join me for a drink before you head out? I could use a few minutes to unwind. Ellen hesitated but agreed. They found a quiet booth, and Frank fetched their drinks. How do you think it went? Ellen asked. Better than expected, Frank replied. No major objections, just some concerns to iron out. My biggest question is, what happens if I finish 6 months early? I've mapped out an accelerated schedule, and it's possible. Ellen's face lit up. That would be amazing. We've had to decline as many contracts as we've accepted. An early finish would be a game changer. They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Frank added, You handled yourself well in there. You clearly know your stuff. Thanks, Ellen replied, smiling. Having this project completed early would be huge for the company. Not to mention the profits, Frank joked. You'll be rolling in cash. Ellen chuckled, then asked, How do you handle all the travel? Does your wife mind? No wife, Frank admitted. She left me for a younger guy 4 years ago. Turns out she had a couple of affairs while we were married. What about you? I noticed no wedding ring. Same story, Ellen said. My husband left me 8 years ago for someone younger. It still stings sometimes. Frank regretted bringing it up, seeing the pain flash across her face. It's tough either way, he said gently, but maybe starting fresh isn't the worst thing. Ellen nodded, and their conversation shifted to lighter topics. For a moment, it felt like a fresh start for them both. Frank shifted the conversation to their kids. He shared his disappointment that his son had no interest in college, while Ellen proudly spoke about her daughter, now a teacher in California. Their talk meandered through topics, work, life, politics, until Frank asked about vacations. Ellen admitted she hadn't taken one since returning to work after her divorce. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, interrupted only by the bartender's call of, Last call? I haven't closed down a bar since college, Ellen joked. Must be my riveting conversation, Frank teased. Ellen smiled, finding Frank's company unexpectedly easy and comfortable. He walked her to her car, shook her hand, and waited until she drove away. Glancing in her rearview mirror, she thought about how much she'd enjoyed the evening. It had been a refreshing change. After days of intense negotiations, all parties agreed on the construction plans. The groundbreaking ceremony drew contractors, union leaders, and the press, with the project featured in the Sunday business section. Construction began on September 15th, and local unions had no trouble filling positions thanks to a slowdown in the area. Frank delayed starting the third shift until the site work and concrete slab were well underway. Once the slab was ready, the concrete contractor began pouring. The pace of work was relentless. Frank hired 2 retired project managers to help resolve issues before they escalated. Daily 20-minute progress meetings ensured that foremen stayed informed and prepared to address challenges. Ellen Harper attended every meeting, dedicating several hours daily to the site. Her insights often saved time and streamlined operations. By early November, The slabs for the additions were complete, and machinery for the first phase was being installed. Protecting the still-curing concrete became a priority as progress accelerated. Frank was impressed by the cooperation between contractors, unions, and workers. It was the key to their success. On November 9th, Ellen asked Frank to meet her and Grant for lunch to discuss an urgent matter. At noon, Frank joined them in the conference room where lunch had been delivered. "Hope you're okay with today's special from the cafeteria," Ellen said as he sat down. Frank assured her it was fine, and Grant began, "Frank, we've been offered a major contract we've wanted for years. The issue is we need to install extremely precise machinery in the secure building during the third phase of construction. This equipment is critical. It can drill a hole in a needle without bending it. Can we prioritize the secure building and delay the existing section?" Frank spread out the machinery drawings alongside the original blueprints. After reviewing the plans, he nodded. "We designed space for future expansion. We can use that for the new machinery. Overhead electrical feeds won't be an issue, but I'll need your input to avoid complications. How quickly can we finalize the design?" 5 to 7 days, Grant replied. "I'm flying back to my office over Thanksgiving," Frank said. "If Ellen joins me, we can work through the weekend with my team to fast-track the design." Grant encouraged Ellen to go, emphasizing the importance of the project. Despite initial hesitation, Ellen agreed after Grant reassured her. "I won't sell the company while you're gone," he joked. Frank promised to handle travel arrangements while Ellen prepared her team to manage the plant in her absence. Their collaboration was set, and they returned to work, ready to tackle the next phase of the ambitious project. With Thanksgiving approaching, finding available flights proved challenging, but Frank finally secured 2 first-class tickets. He contacted his team, asking for volunteers willing to work over the holiday weekend. His plan was to finalize the redesigns with intense collaboration, aiming to finish within 5 days. Frank and Ellen's flight was set for Tuesday evening. Before departing, Frank briefed his designers on the changes Carlson required, ensuring work began before they arrived. Normally, Jack Park would oversee such adjustments, but with Jack in Europe until the new year, Frank had to handle it himself. The day before Thanksgiving, Frank picked up Ellen early. Navigating the holiday crowds at the packed airport, they boarded their flight and settled in. Once airborne, they discussed the project until the conversation lulled. Ellen stared out the window, and Frank noticed a hint of sadness in her expression. "Was your daughter planning to visit for Thanksgiving?" he asked gently. Tears welled up in Ellen's eyes. "No. She called a few days ago and said she'd be alone. When I pressed, she quickly ended the call. I'm worried something's wrong, and it's painful not knowing how to help." Frank squeezed her hand. "If she needed you, she'd reach out. Sometimes they just need space." Ellen didn't respond, lost in her thoughts. They sat in quiet understanding for the rest of the flight. Upon arrival, an airport limo took them to Frank's house. Frank had instructed his son to hire a maid service, ensuring the home was spotless. As they stepped inside, Ellen remarked, "You've got a lovely home. It's so tidy. It seems your son keeps it that way." Frank chuckled. "Let's just say a cleaning service helped." He showed her to a guest room and made sure she had everything she needed, pointing out her private bathroom. "There's a great little Italian restaurant nearby. How about dinner there? We'll get an early start tomorrow." Ellen agreed, and they headed out. The restaurant was quiet, likely due to Thanksgiving preparations. Frank greeted his friend Victor, the owner, introducing Ellen and explaining they were working on a project together. Over dinner, Frank ordered his usual Jack Daniels while Ellen chose white wine. "I feel bad Carlson has you working on Thanksgiving," she said. "Well, not entirely," Frank replied. "Victor's preparing a full Thanksgiving dinner for me. He'll drop it off tomorrow, so we'll just heat it up and enjoy." Ellen laughed. "Victor must think highly of you to go to that trouble." "Partly because I own 25% of this place," Frank admitted. He explained how he'd invested in Victor's dream, and it had been a mutually beneficial partnership. Victor's an incredible chef and a solid businessman. As they enjoyed their meal, Victor brought over a bottle of Italian wine. "You've got to try this," he said, pouring them each a glass. They both praised the wine, and Victor left the bottle at their table. The evening passed pleasantly, as they shared stories and laughter. When the restaurant emptied, Ellen smiled. "I think it's time to head out. This wine is going to my head." Back at the house, Ellen turned to Frank. "That was one of the best dinners I've had in years. Thank you." "It's not every day you dine with the owner of a restaurant," Frank grinned. "It was the company that made it special." Ellen laughed lightly. "I should get to bed. If you expect me to work tomorrow, I'll need some rest." Frank wished her good night and retreated to his room. As Ellen lay in bed, she reflected on the evening. It had been a long time since she'd enjoyed herself so much. Frank was kind, easy to talk to, and refreshingly respectful. With a smile, she closed her eyes and drifted into peaceful sleep. Early the next morning, Frank and Ellen headed to Park Machinery to tackle Carlson's requested changes. After reviewing the plans and discussing strategies, they realized the modifications would be easier than anticipated. By 5 p.m., they wrapped up, hungry from skipping lunch, and headed back to Frank's house. When they arrived, Ellen noticed the abundance of food Victor had provided. "Are we hosting an army?" she joked, gesturing to the packed refrigerator and cooler. As Frank began preparing dinner, Ellen playfully pushed him out of the kitchen. "I don't trust a man in the kitchen," she teased, sending him to watch football. An hour later, she set the dining table with a feast, even adding candles for ambiance. Frank marveled at the spread. "It's incredible. Everything tastes freshly cooked." "I'm glad you're enjoying it," Ellen replied. "If I'd been alone, I'd have microwaved everything, and we both know how that tastes." They ate until they were full, lingering at the table in easy conversation. Afterward, Ellen packed leftover food into freezer bags, ensuring Frank's son would have plenty to eat when he returned. With the dishwasher running, they moved to the living room. Ellen browsed Frank's music collection, selecting a few albums for the stereo. They settled on the sofa, shoes off, feet propped on the coffee table, quietly enjoying the music. Breaking the silence, Ellen said, "Thank you for tonight. This was my first Thanksgiving without my daughter, and I was dreading being alone. It means so much to me." Frank put his arm around her, and she leaned closer. They sat together until all the albums had played. When he asked if she wanted to hear more, she shook her head. "No, this was perfect," she said. "I think I'll head to bed. Thank you again for everything." Ellen retreated to her room, reflecting on the evening. She was relieved Frank hadn't tried to kiss her, appreciating the comfortable companionship instead. It was the first time since her divorce that she felt truly at ease with a man, but she knew she needed time to sort through her emotions. The following morning, they returned to Park Machinery to finalize the changes. Frank introduced Ellen to the design team, emphasizing her role in guiding the revisions. Throughout the day, they worked collaboratively, carefully considering how each adjustment would impact Carlson's operations and future plans. Using AutoCAD, the team quickly incorporated Ellen's approved changes into the project drawings. Frank kept the workday limited to 8 hours, ensuring no one burned out. In the evenings, they picked up dinner on the way home and reviewed the day's progress. They'd relax afterward, watching TV or listening to music. By early Monday morning, the redesign was complete. Confident in the plan, they agreed to move forward with construction and began preparations to negotiate the costs of the adjustments. Frank's design team wrapped up the additional costs for the project, and Ellen personally thanked each member for their dedication and the time they gave up over the holiday weekend. Wanting to acknowledge the sacrifices made by their families, she asked for the addresses of all the team members' homes. She later arranged for large floral bouquets and fruit baskets to be delivered to their wives, including thoughtful notes expressing gratitude for their support during such a busy time. That evening, Frank suggested they take a break and enjoy a nice dinner before returning to their demanding schedules. He had already made reservations at one of the city's finest restaurants. Ellen, always prepared, had packed a dress suitable for the occasion. When she emerged, Frank complimented her elegance, making her laugh with his playful charm. At the restaurant, the two enjoyed the signature surf and turf, with fresh lobster flown in daily. The meal exceeded their expectations, and Ellen couldn't help but praise the food. After dinner, feeling full and satisfied, Frank suggested a change of pace. Instead of heading home, he drove to a nearby nightclub. The venue was lively, even for a Monday night, with dim lighting, a full bar, and a dance floor glowing under bright lights. The music catered to their age group, creating a relaxed and welcoming atmosphere. They settled at the bar and ordered drinks, enjoying the ambiance. As they were talking, an unexpected encounter disrupted the mood. Frank's ex-wife, Claudia, approached them, making polite but tense conversation. She explained her current divorce and introduced her younger companion across the room. After a brief exchange, she returned to her table, leaving Frank to apologize to Ellen for the encounter. Ellen reassured him, observing that Claudia seemed to carry her own unhappiness. Shifting the focus, Frank invited Ellen to dance. Though hesitant at first, Ellen soon found herself enjoying the experience. Frank was a natural on the dance floor, and she quickly rediscovered her own rhythm. The two danced through much of the night, sharing a connection that felt both easy and rare. As the hours passed, the club emptied, leaving Frank and Ellen among the last on the dance floor. By the time the night ended, Ellen felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She realized how much she had enjoyed the evening, not just the dinner or the dancing, but the ease of Frank's company and the sense of genuine camaraderie between them. As they approached the car, Frank opened the door for Ellen. She paused, and he instinctively reached for her, pulling her gently into his arms. For a long moment, she rested against him, savoring the warmth of being held again. When she looked up, she saw the same emotions mirrored in his eyes. She leaned her head against his chest and gave him a soft kiss, breaking years of emotional barriers. Ellen asked Frank for patience, explaining she needed time to sort through the pain of her past. Frank assured her he understood, as he had endured his own heartache. They agreed to take things slow, but made it clear neither wanted to let the connection slip away. The drive home was quiet, yet comfortable, with Ellen holding Frank's hand. Once inside, she kissed him again and thanked him for making her feel alive after so many years. She retired to her room, where she lay in bed reflecting on the evening. The dinner, the dancing, and the emotional warmth had been transformative. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Hugging a pillow, she fell into a peaceful sleep. Back at Carlson, Frank threw himself into incorporating the changes into the construction schedule. Ellen was a constant presence on site, providing her input and collaborating with the team. Their dinners together became a weekly tradition, and Sundays were spent unwinding together. The project's pace remained demanding, but the team's shared commitment made progress steady. A few days before Christmas, Ellen arrived on site to review updates. While they addressed her concerns, Frank noticed something was weighing on her. She confided that her daughter Vanessa and her husband were flying in the next day. However, a broken production line required Ellen's attention, and she wouldn't be able to pick them up. Frank immediately offered to go to the airport in her place, reassuring her that everything at the site was under control. The next morning, Frank stood at the airport holding a sign with Vanessa's married name, which Ellen had provided at the last minute. A young woman approached, introducing herself as Vanessa. When Frank asked about her husband, her composure broke, and tears streamed down her face. Sitting on her carry-on, she confessed she wasn't ready to face her mother yet. Frank led her to an airport lounge, where the dim lighting and privacy offered some comfort. After ordering drinks, Vanessa quickly downed hers and asked for another. Frank encouraged her to share what was troubling her, assuring her he wouldn't judge. Vanessa hesitated, but eventually opened up. She acknowledged Frank as the man who had been brightening her mother's life and appreciated his honesty about his relationship with Ellen. Then she shifted to her own struggles. Her husband John had changed after they moved to California. While she dedicated herself to teaching, he became immersed in the party culture of his job in the tech industry. Surrounded by coworkers who indulged in reckless behavior, he began spending weekends away, claiming it was expected. As Vanessa spoke, Frank listened attentively, offering quiet support. She revealed her fear of returning home and her uncertainty about how to face her mother. Frank gently assured her that Ellen's love and understanding would be her greatest source of strength. The conversation gave Vanessa a small measure of relief, setting the stage for the difficult reunion ahead. About 2 weeks earlier, Vanessa's husband had moved in with a younger woman, calling their marriage boring and saying he wanted more from life than work. Vanessa decided she would return home after the school year ended, as her teaching contract bound her to stay until then. Frank listened as she explained, shocked at how quickly her marriage had unraveled, and moved to comfort her as she broke down in tears. He assured her that her pain was valid, but reminded her that she had a choice: let the hurt consume her or start rebuilding her life. He shared his own struggles after his divorce, emphasizing how hard it was, but also how necessary it had been to move forward. When Vanessa composed herself, she asked about Frank's relationship with her mother. Frank explained that while they were still figuring things out, Ellen had been deeply hurt in the past and needed time to heal. He admired Ellen's resilience and the strength she showed by building a successful career and raising her daughter. As they drove to Ellen's house, Vanessa mentioned her plans for Christmas. She intended to spend the morning with her mother and the evening with her father, whose third marriage was falling apart. Once home, Frank helped carry her bags inside. Vanessa thanked him for listening and asked if he would stay while she told her mother about her failed marriage. Frank declined, believing the conversation needed to remain between mother and daughter. Before leaving, he shared a plan for Christmas Eve. Vanessa would call him after Ellen went to bed so he could secretly place gifts under the tree. Later, Ellen returned home after a long day addressing a production line issue. Vanessa ran to her, embracing her tightly before breaking down in tears. Once Vanessa calmed, she recounted her marital troubles. Ellen held her, apologizing for hurtful comments she'd made before Vanessa moved to California. She assured her daughter of her support and set about preparing dinner, feeling they needed the privacy of home rather than dining out. As Ellen cooked, Vanessa brought up Frank, commenting on how kind and attractive he was. Ellen brushed off the remark, insisting they were just friends. Vanessa, unconvinced, pressed further, noting how often her mother spoke about Frank. Ellen admitted they were taking things slow, both wary of repeating past heartaches. Vanessa smiled knowingly, convinced that her mother had found something special with Frank, even if neither was ready to fully acknowledge it yet. Vanessa threw a towel playfully at her mother, exasperated by her hesitance about Frank. She pointed out how lucky Ellen was to have someone like him, kind, attractive, and clearly devoted. Ellen laughed, dodging the towel, but admitted she wasn't sure what the future held. After dinner, the two spent hours talking, delving into topics they had never fully shared before. Ellen opened up about years of bottled-up emotions, while Vanessa revealed the pain she had been carrying in her heart. By the time they went to bed, their bond had deepened into a rare mother-daughter friendship built on trust and mutual understanding. Late on Christmas Eve, Frank meticulously wrapped presents and loaded them into his truck. The snowy forecast made him grateful for the protective cover on the truck bed. With his phone clipped to his belt, he waited for Vanessa's call. Just past midnight, she called to say Ellen had finally gone to bed. Arriving at Ellen's house, Frank quietly unloaded the gifts. Vanessa held the door for him as he made several trips, teasing him about how much he had bought. When the last of the presents was placed under the tree, he whispered a cheerful "Merry Christmas" to Vanessa and left, proud of his stealth. The next morning, Ellen made coffee before waking Vanessa. With her daughter's limited luggage space, Ellen planned to give her cash instead of many presents. But when they entered the living room, Ellen froze in shock at the mountain of gifts under the tree. She immediately questioned Vanessa, who denied responsibility, pointing out her own gift was already in her room. Confused, Ellen began reading the tags. To Ellen from Santa Claus. Realization dawned, and she picked up the phone to call Frank. When he answered, she invited him over to watch her open the presents. Laughing, he agreed. Minutes later, he arrived to a warm hug and a kiss from Ellen. She handed him coffee and led him to the living room, where the unwrapping began. Vanessa noticed a separate pile of gifts labeled for her. She squealed with excitement and dove in, leaving the largest package for last. Before she could open it, Frank explained it wasn't the actual gift, but a hint of what was to come. Curious, Vanessa tore off the wrapping to reveal a laptop. Frank explained that while this one was his, a brand new Dell laptop would be delivered to her home in California, tailored for her needs as a teacher. Overwhelmed, Vanessa hugged him tightly. Ellen smiled at their exchange, grateful for Frank's thoughtfulness. Then she noticed a package under the tree. She handed it to Frank, explaining it was from Grant Carlson in appreciation for his hard work. Inside was a gold Rolex with Frank's name engraved on the back. Ellen handed him another gift, this one from her. Inside was a sleek leather briefcase embossed with his initials. Frank smiled, kissed her, and thanked her warmly. Vanessa watched the scene unfold, grinning as she witnessed the growing connection between her mother and Frank. It was a Christmas filled with unexpected gifts, heartfelt moments, and the promise of a new chapter for all of them. Ellen noticed a small package under the tree as she began to stand. Curious, she opened it to find a set of keys, her confusion evident as she looked at Frank for an explanation. He gestured toward the window, urging her to take a look. Peering outside, Ellen saw a sleek BMW parked in the driveway. Speechless, she turned back to Frank, who wrapped a coat around her shoulders and led her outside. The car gleamed in the winter light, and Ellen could hardly believe it was hers. Frank reassured her it was not beyond his means, reminding her of the bonus he would earn for completing the project early. He explained that the old Buick she'd been driving wasn't reliable or safe anymore, and he wanted her to have something better. Ellen couldn't deny the truth. Her uncle had given her the Buick years ago as a temporary solution, but it had become more trouble than it was worth. Overcome with gratitude, she kissed Frank deeply. Watching from the window, Vanessa smiled, knowing her mother was finally in good hands. By early afternoon, Ellen had dinner ready. Afterward, she drove Vanessa to her father's house, where she planned to spend the evening. Vanessa mentioned she wouldn't return until the next afternoon, giving Ellen and Frank the night to themselves. When Ellen came back, she found Frank cleaning the kitchen. She playfully pushed him into the living room, handed him the remote, and ordered him to stay on the couch. Once the kitchen was tidied, Ellen joined Frank. Sitting beside him, she thanked him for the thoughtful way he had helped Vanessa through her struggles. Frank's support, she said, had not only made Vanessa's Christmas special, but hers as well. She leaned in for a kiss, and soon they were wrapped in each other's arms, the TV forgotten as they sat in the quiet glow of the evening. Frank mentioned needing a ride home, but Ellen surprised him by asking him to stay. She admitted she was finally ready to let him into her life fully, knowing his patience and respect had proven how much he cared. Taking his hand, she led him to her bedroom. The next morning, Ellen woke with Frank's arm around her, his warmth comforting. For the first time in years, she felt truly content and hopeful about the future. She resolved not to let him slip away, realizing she had already wasted too much time on past pain. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of her phone. It was her Aunt Agnes, who tearfully explained that Uncle Grant had suffered a heart attack the previous night. Though he was stable in intensive care, he had been asking to see Ellen. She quickly assured her aunt she was on her way. Frank insisted on accompanying her, warming up the car while she got ready. Without argument, Ellen joined him, taking the driver's seat for the first time in her new BMW. They drove straight to the hospital, heading to the intensive care unit where Agnes greeted them with relief. Grant was expected to recover, but he would need to rest and have a nurse at home for a while. Agnes also mentioned that Grant's son was flying in that evening. A nurse emerged to take Ellen into the room, explaining that Grant had been asking for her. She entered quietly and was struck by how frail he looked, a stark contrast to the strong, vibrant man she shared lunch with daily. Taking his hand gently, Ellen fought back tears, determined to be the strength her uncle needed as he began his recovery. Ellen sat beside her uncle as he haltingly explained that she would need to manage the business until he recovered. He directed her to a power of attorney document in his desk that gave her full decision-making authority in his absence. Grant urged her to hire someone to assist, acknowledging the workload would be too much for one person. When the nurse asked her to leave, Ellen joined her aunt in the waiting area and shared what Grant had said. Agnes nodded, relieved. She admitted that neither she nor young Grant knew enough about the business to handle it, and expressed gratitude that Ellen was there to step in. After staying a few more hours, Ellen and Frank left. Agnes's sisters arrived to persuade her to go home and rest. On the drive, Frank offered to stay with Ellen, but she declined, explaining she needed time to make plans and wanted to speak privately with Vanessa about what had happened. The next day, Frank returned to work, and their busy schedules left little time for each other. Over the next few weeks, Ellen juggled the demands of running Carlson Fabrication, and the strain began to show. Frank saw how hard she was working, but he also knew she wouldn't ask for help. In mid-January, Jack Park called Frank, asking him to meet at the airport. Frank picked him up, and as they drove, Jack asked if they could stop somewhere to talk. They pulled into a quiet restaurant, where Jack requested a private table and handed the waitress a generous tip to ensure they wouldn't be disturbed. Jack praised Frank's outstanding work, sharing that Grant Carlson had spoken highly of him. Then, he revealed the real reason for his visit. A German company had made an offer to purchase Park machinery, one too lucrative to decline. Jack admitted he believed the Germans were overpaying, but couldn't justify passing on the deal. Frank asked how the sale would impact him. Jack explained that while the Germans intended to keep the current design team, they planned to bring in their own leadership. However, Frank's long-term contract, jokingly extended to 10 years when it was signed, meant they would buy out the remainder, including bonuses, leaving Frank with a substantial payout. Though the sale was finalized, Jack assured Frank that the Germans had agreed to honor all written agreements and review unwritten ones case by case. They would have Frank stay on for 30 days to transition the new lead and complete the Carlson project as planned. Jack added that the Germans believed they could accelerate the schedule, but Frank was skeptical. As they drove toward Carlson, Frank asked Jack to let him break the news. Given Grant's recent heart attack and his growing relationship with Ellen, he felt it was important to deliver the information personally. Jack agreed, trusting Frank's judgment. Frank reflected on the changes in his life. The sale, while unexpected, offered an opportunity for stability. He was ready to leave behind the constant travel and embrace a new chapter. Reassuring Jack, he promised to ensure that the Carlson project was handled with the same care and professionalism it had received under his leadership. Jack, confident in Frank's integrity, left the details in his hands and prepared to head back to the airport. Frank drove Jack back to the airport. where they exchanged a firm handshake and a brief hug. As Jack headed toward the secure area, Frank told him he was glad to see his friend leave the company on his terms and in great financial shape. Jack waved one last time before disappearing from view. On his way back to town, Frank called Ellen's office. When she answered, he requested an urgent meeting. Ellen agreed, and when he arrived, her receptionist directed him straight in. As Frank entered, Ellen greeted him with a warm kiss before stepping back and apologizing for their limited time together since Grant's heart attack. Noticing his serious expression, she moved behind her desk to sit. Frank got straight to the point. He explained that Park Machinery had been sold to a German company, which would assign its own manager to finish the Carlson project. The new leadership had promised to honor all existing agreements, and Frank would stay on for 30 days to assist with the transition. After that, his contract would be bought out, leaving him effectively unemployed. Ellen looked thoughtful. She asked if he planned to return to his home after leaving Park Machinery. Instead of answering, Frank slid a small box across the desk. Opening it, Ellen found a ring inside and smiled. Frank proposed, explaining he had intended to ask her on Christmas, but had held off due to Vanessa's situation. Ellen asked how they would handle their separate homes, and Frank suggested they give them to their grown children and start fresh with a new home of their own. He assured her his financial stability would allow them to choose the perfect place without worry. Ellen walked around the desk and embraced him. She told him she wouldn't let him spend his days idle and proposed a role at Carlson Fabrication as production manager, warning that it might involve a pay cut. Frank accepted, joking about working for his wife. Ellen revealed that Grant planned to retire soon and had arranged for Frank to inherit 51% of the company's stock after his passing, making him the majority owner. Grant Jr. would inherit 49%, along with substantial assets, ensuring everyone's satisfaction. Frank pulled her close, teasing that he'd keep an eye on her in the meantime. Ellen kissed him and agreed to marry him, adding with a grin that she could always fire him if she changed her mind. As she admired her ring, she told Frank to head back to his trailer to rest, hinting that he wouldn't get much sleep that night. With a laugh, he left, the promise of their shared future filling him with joy.